What if I told you that somewhere in London, right now, a Nigerian family, a Ghanaian family is selling their properties not because their visa expired, not because they were forced out, but because they want to return back to their country? Some of you may be saying, that's a lie, that's not true. But let's get to break this out and down in this video. You see, there is a quiet, accelerating wave of Nigerians and Ghanaians who spent years building lives in the UK who are now walking away from them on purpose. Are you wondering why? If this is what you're interested in, click the subscribe button, click the like button, and let's get into business right away. In this video, we are going to look at how the diaspora is quietly walking away. At the end of this video, you'll get to find out if it is still worth it traveling to the United Kingdoms. But we'll be analyzing the following things: who's actually leaving and the real numbers behind Nigeria's shift from the pure japa source to a country with a visible return current, the 7 pressures diaspora families cite most often, from taxation to the invisible ceiling in corporate Britain, the returnee voices themselves, citizens and settled residents who sold homes and left voluntarily. And finally, we are going to look at what this pattern signals about where the diaspora's loyalty is actually heading. Here is a quick and honest note. Departures are still outpaced by new arrivals. So this isn't a story about the UK emptying out. This is a story about a specific growing group of people who already made it, who had the jobs, the visa, the settled life, that are choosing to leave anyway. That sounds strange. Starting with the trend line, non-EU emigration from the UK has risen sharply since 2022. Official estimates put annual non-EU departures at roughly 280,000 in the most recent full year, up substantially from levels seen just a few years earlier. Nigeria sits consistently among the UK's top 5 non-EU nationalities, both arriving and increasingly leaving. Beyond the statistics, Nigeria's own immigration data tells a parallel story. The International Organization for Migration recorded close to 15,000 Nigerians returning home through formal assisted return programs in 2025 alone, with several thousands more in the first month of 2026, and that's before counting the far larger, harder to measure group of citizens and settled professionals living entirely on their own terms without any government program at all. Now, when we put those two data points together, the rising formal departures plus a self-directed wave the statistics can't fully capture, you'd get a trend that's no longer a handful of viral TikTok stories. It is a measurable shift. Ask diaspora's family where the disillusionment starts, and most of them point to the same place: the pay slip. Income tax, national insurance, mandatory pension contribution, and student loan repayment are all taken before a single bill gets paid. I'm sure you've never heard of that. For many skilled migrants, a salary that looks strong on paper can shrink by nearly half once the deductions are applied. And that reality hits harder for anyone who arrived in the UK already carrying the weight of a higher cost of living than they budgeted for. For a generation that migrated specifically to build wealth, watching half of every paycheck disappear before it's even touched reframes the entire migration bargain. You didn't leave home to fund someone else's system. You left to build your own. What is left after tax gets absorbed fast. You see, UK grocery inflation has been widely reported in recent years. Energy standing charges apply before a household uses a single unit of power, and council tax sale by postcode regardless of income. For migrant families, budgeting in Naira or cedis before arrival, the arithmetic of what's actually left at the end of the month can be genuinely shocking. Rents, utilities, phone bill, and the remainder is gone before savings even enters the conversation. This is the moment that many returnees describe as a turning point, not a single crisis, but the slow realization, month after month, that the mass simply doesn't add up anymore. The second driver is time, not money. Long commutes and demanding workplace cultures are well documented across employment surveys, and diaspora workers in healthcare, hospitality, and corporate roles frequently describe a job that never fully stops. Evenings and weekends absorbed by work that should have ended hours earlier. Families living cite this constantly. Not a lack of income, but a lack of life to spend it on. You see, a British salary means little if there's no time left to enjoy the country you're earning it in. This is where the diaspora's advantage back home becomes visible by its absence. In Lagos or Accra, extended families and trusted neighbors routinely absorb childcare informally, freeing parents to build careers. But in London, that safety net rarely exists. Full-time nursery fees for one child can run into four figures monthly, a cost that compounds quickly for families with more than one, and many temporary visa holders are locked out of UK childcare subsidies entirely by immigration status. So for diaspora parents, this is often the single line item that tips the decision. Raising children in Britain for many migrant families has quietly become something closer to a luxury. Homeownership was once Britain's promise of permanence. It's widely reported to have become dramatically less attainable over the past 2 decades, with London's property prices rising far faster than average wages. Non-UK nationals frequently face larger required deposits than citizens do. A documented pattern in UK mortgage lending meant to offset perceived risk. And for migrants who've spent a decade building a career and a credit history in Britain, discovering that permanence is still priced differently for them is one of the most direct signals the system sends. And it's a signal a growing number are choosing not to keep waiting out. Here is the mechanism that didn't exist for earlier generations of the diaspora. Remote work has turned a UK salary into something portable. A growing share of London's workforce now operates fully or partly remote, and for professionals in tech, finance, and consulting, that British paycheck can be earned from Lagos or Accra just as easily as from a flat in Peckham, while the cost of living it has to cover drops dramatically. Multiple returnees interviewed by Nigerian outlets describes exactly this pattern. Keep the UK employer or client, converting the same income into a materially higher standard of living back home. This is arguably the single biggest structural enabler behind the wave of departures happening right now. This exit ramp isn't open to everyone. Nurses, care workers, and hospitality staff facing the same cost pressures rarely have remote options. But for the professional class driving much of this movement, remote work has turned going home from a retreat into a financial rational upgrade. There's a final pressure that shows up less in spreadsheets and more in lived testimonies. A persistent sense among diaspora professionals of an invisible ceiling in corporate Britain. The feeling of needing to work twice as hard to be seen as equally capable, and daily friction that's hard to quantify but easy to live through year after year. This is the hardest claim in this file to attach a single hard statistics to. And we are not going to pretend otherwise. What we can say is that it's a consistent repeated theme across returnee interviews and diaspora community. Nigerian outlets have documented a rising pattern of British Nigerian and British Ghanaian families making the same call, citing proximity to extended family mental peace, and a desire to raise their children closer to culture and community, alongside the financial upside remote income now makes possible. This is the part the raw statistics can't fully capture. People who had already won by any conventional migration measure: citizenship, property, career, walking away from it voluntarily. That is not desperation, that is a verdict. I started this video by mentioning a family selling their properties off just to return back to their country. And I'll be ending this video with 3 things worth carrying with you. The first thing, this movement is driven by people who succeeded, not people who failed. Citizens, settled professionals, homeowners. The departures documented here are choices made from a position of option, not desperation. That's what makes this pattern worth taking seriously rather than dismissing. Secondly, remote work has quietly rewritten the migration calculus for an entire professional class. For the first time, a UK salary and an African cost of living can coexist in the same household budget. And that single mechanism may be doing more to drive japada than any single grievance on its own. Thirdly, but not the least, when the same specific complaints repeat across hundreds of independent testimonies, the tax cuts, the childcare wall, the housing deposit gap, the invisible ceiling, that repetition itself is a form of evidence, even where hard statistics are thin. A pattern named consistently by people living it deserves to be documented, not dismissed. If you want the next chapter of this story, what happens to the Nigerians and Ghanaian economies absorbing this returning talent,